Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the PHYSIOMICS PLC investor presentation for the full year results 2021. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged, can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Just click Q&A, scroll to the bottom, type your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and you'll be notified once they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Jim Millin, CEO of PHYSIOMICS PLC. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I'm Jim Millen, Dr. Jim Millen, CEO of PHYSIOMICS, and I'd like to spend a few minutes today talking to you about our full year results that were published just this morning. I'll skip over the usual disclaimer. I'll just spend a couple of minutes in case there are any investors out there who are a little bit less familiar with us. So our business model is we're primarily a consultancy, and we combine a deep understanding of cancer biology together with knowledge of quantitative pharmacology, how much drug gets into the body, where it ends up, what effect it has, together with the ability to identify and to format data and then to program all of that in order to be able to generate insights to help our clients develop, really great cancer drugs. Our business is currently split in two parts, really. The commercial part, the revenue generating part on the left, is a business which works with small biotech companies right up to large pharmaceutical companies, providing them with services of the nature that I just described. And in particular using a software tool that we developed in-house over a number of years called Virtual Tumor, and indeed a tool which is constantly evolving, and talk a little bit more about that later. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, you can see that, as previously announced, we have a number of activities in the field of personalized oncology. Most of these have been funded by a variety of successful grant applications over the last 3 or 4 years, from both Innovate UK and from the National Institute of Healthcare Research through its I4I program. The particular focus that we have is on the personalization of dosing. We believe that there's a real opportunity to personalize dosing in a way that helps to avoid certain safety issues that come, of course, with all cancer drugs, and also to optimize the efficacy of those drugs. So through that grant funding, we've developed a tool. We have, as announced last Christmas, entered into a collaboration with a large US company, Tabula Rasa Healthcare, through its subsidiary DoseMe RX. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I know that there are many questions on that collaboration, but it's going really well in summary. And I'll give a little bit more flavor around that just presently. And then just finally on this slide, the other activity that we've got going on in personalized dosing is the UK-based and the I4I sponsored partner trial, which is being run down in Portsmouth by the great people at the Portsmouth Technology Trials Unit and the NHS Trust at Portsmouth. And as we announced just a few weeks ago, that trial, although it has been slightly delayed in its start as a result of COVID, has now started and recruited its first patient, which is really fantastic news. Just a very brief word about our client base. I've said it already, but we really work with pretty much everybody who is involved in or interested in treating cancer. And that ranges from small to mid-sized companies. We took on this year a new small client, NewMap Therapeutics, which is both well-funded and led by really considerable industry veterans, and that collaboration has been going exceptionally well. We maintain a very close relationship with our key big pharma client, Merck Serono, Merck KGaA, as I think it's technically known, and have also and continue to work with other big pharma In parallel with that, we have the grant-funded collaborations that I just mentioned, and we've worked with a number of academic centres, including Portsmouth, as I mentioned just now, also Oxford University, and various grant-giving bodies in the UK and elsewhere. The sorts of questions that we help these various bodies answer are the sorts of questions that need to be answered when you're developing cancer drugs. So most cancer drugs have, both a therapeutic benefit, but also some unfortunate side effects. And finding the right balance for the right patient in the right disease is really what we're helping our clients to do. I won't read all of these bullets out, but in essence, we're helping the people that we work with get the very most out of the drugs that they're developing, and helping them to get those drugs to market in the most cost-effective way possible. So moving on to just a couple of excerpts from our full year report that was, as I say, published via RNS this morning. The financial highlights here, I won't read them all out. Obviously, it's been a little bit of a challenging year, partly as a result of COVID. So we did see some slowdown in some of our clients' clinical trials as a result of COVID, just as I mentioned just now, we saw a delay in the start of our own partner trial. Well, we're seeing that mirrored in a number of client engagements as well. And that has meant that some projects that were due to start this year were delayed. We hope and believe that to a significant extent that will be a timing effect, and that those same projects will still kick off. Some of them already have, but those that haven't will also kick off in the near future. So we're optimistic that the effect of COVID-19, obviously, pending any further change in the status of the pandemic, but assuming that the current trend continues, the hope is that things will start to normalize in healthcare systems and allow, in particular, cancer trials and cancer treatment to continue at the level that it was prior to the pandemic. As a result, both our revenues and our profit were down. However, I think, again, on a positive note, our cash position remains very strong. And, despite everything that's happened, our cash and equivalents at the end of the financial year ended 30th of June 2021 were really not far different from our position 12 months before. And that is despite a material amount of investment that's gone in this year. And really, that's the other, that's the other reason for especially the reduction in the profit this year, is that we have engaged in a number of investment activities that we think are going to generate long-term value. And when we raised money in 2020, I think it was, we set out what we were going to do with that fundraise, and we have started to do it. So we've invested in marketing, for example. We've invested in new business development resource, and we were very pleased to welcome Hayley Close, our new head of business development, just recently, as announced a month or so ago. We've had the collaboration with Valorex, which has been on a risk-sharing basis, so has involved us doing some work at risk, but in return for a material share of any agreements that they may make should they come through. We've invested, as I mentioned just now, in the collaboration with Tabula Rasa, which is at our cost initially, as in we put our time in without being paid for it. But of course, we hope that will lead to revenues in the future as well. So I really hope and believe that the investments that we've made this year will pay dividends in the relatively near term. And I've probably said some of the things that I was meant to say on this side already, but let's just take a look and see if there's anything extra that we'd like to pick up on here. Continuing to have strong client relationships, I think I covered previously. The partnership with Tabula Rasa Healthcare's DoseMe subsidiary. I did say at the beginning that I would say a little bit more about that, and obviously we've had a lot of shareholder interest, a lot of questions in the run-up to this presentation around how that's going. And I'm really pleased to be able to say that the integration of the PHYSIOMICS software into the DoseMe RX platform has now been largely completed, just very recently. and that collaboration is moving to a phase of user testing, and that testing will go on probably over the next few months, so really between now and the end of the year. And once we get the feedback from that testing, then we'll think about next steps. So can't say too much more about that at this point, but just to say that that is still moving forwards, that we have reached a material milestone in having completed that initial integration. And both ourselves and our partner DesmiRx are very excited to see what will happen next. The agreement with Valorex, the engagement with Valorex continues. We stated that we were going to, as part of the update of the agreement announced in February this year, we were going to be involved in their scientific advisory board, and that has indeed happened. So my colleague, Dr. Christophe Chassagnol, has joined the Valorex scientific advisory board and participated in a number of their meetings over the course of this year. Obviously, we can't comment on the content of those meetings. That's for Valorex to do or as they see fit. But I can say that that collaboration remains strong, and that we look forward to continuing to work with Valorex going forwards. The partner study I've mentioned already, and then perhaps the last thing that I haven't already covered on this slide is the fact that we ourselves held a scientific advisory board in the spring. And as a result of that, we identified a number of other possible avenues of investigation for uses of our modeling technology in other healthcare settings. So we're effectively going through a diligence process, looking at a number of different potential opportunities for us to apply all of those skills and capabilities that I started off telling you about on the first slide, but in related life science settings, slightly apart from the quantitative pharmacology work that's been the core of our business up to this point in time. Again, I can't provide any further details of that right at this point. However, as we begin to firm up and look at specific ideas, then we will of course keep the market updated. So just to say a couple more things about the different areas in which we're working, both the two current areas, which are those in the boxes at the top of this slide, and also potential future directions, which I alluded to just now. So I think the core consulting business continues to be strong. And although we took a little bit of a hit in revenues this year, I don't think that was as a result of lack of interest in companies doing this sort of work. And in particular, and I've said this before in other presentations, there is a very genuine and real drive on the part of regulatory authorities, perhaps most on the part of the FDA through its Project Optimus. And you guys can Google that and read more about it. But essentially, the FDA and other regulators are saying we need more than just the traditional, heuristic ways in which people work out what first in human doses should be. We need to see modeling. We need to see, a mathematical, statistical justification for those early human trial dosing regimens. And I think that plays, very well into PHYSIOMICS' sweet spot, as this is really core to the sort of work that we do with the majority of our clients. Secondly, there is still significant funding going into life science companies. So, every day you read about new startups that are funded quite heavily, especially in the US, but also in Europe. So there are no shortage of small and medium-sized companies coming through now that have great ideas with real potential, and who could be potential clients and benefit from the services that PHYSIOMICS can provide. And many of these small companies operate a semi or entirely virtual model, whereby they really outsource almost all of their functions, keeping just a handful of employees in-house. And again, we are there for them, and that sort of company and that sort of model fits very well with the PHYSIOMICS business model itself. Moving across to personalized medicine, I think it goes without saying, and we've seen this in particular as a result of the COVID pandemic, that there are enormous cost pressures on health systems. There were before COVID, and it's even more so the case now. So I think that the tools that we're developing, which help health systems, individual hospitals, individual doctors, to optimize the use both of some existing drugs, and we're starting off, as you know, with docetaxel, and in particular with its use in prostate cancer. But the same principle can be applied to other current drugs and potentially to drugs in development as well. Because I think that with all of these pressures on the health system, then making the best use out of drugs, avoiding unfortunate side effects where that is possible, getting the best efficacy out of drugs where that is possible, I think is becoming, a commercial reality. And our partner, DosMeRx, a subsidiary of Tabula Rasa Healthcare in the US, already has an established business model, as you guys know, in the US, which leverages the need to do this, especially in North America. And we're looking forward to continuing that business relationship. And then just finally, I guess, to reiterate that we are actively exploring other areas where our particular capabilities, cancer, quantitative pharmacology, data analysis, coding, where those can be used in other healthcare settings. There are plenty of examples of companies that are raising interest in the areas of drug discovery, diagnostics, analysis that helps companies stratify patients for clinical trials. And we believe that our technology and that our capabilities, may well have some application in one or more of these spaces, or other spaces still to be identified. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, we will keep you guys updated as we make progress in thinking further about that, as we work to identify and to triage new opportunities. So in summary, and again, I don't think I'm saying anything that I haven't said over the last few minutes here. We want to continue to build our core business. We are generating great thought leadership. We have a great social media strategy now, which is generating, real results. If you Google, PKPD modeling, then PHYSIOMICS tends to appear pretty high up in the Google rankings. And that's not because we're paying for that to happen. It's because the Google search algorithm actually picks up on all of the news flow that involves PHYSIOMICS, and picks up on the media around the relationships that we have in this space. So, this is a very exciting thing for me. We're going to leverage our new expanded business development capability to more aggressively grow our consulting business. It's something that we've been talking about, over the course of this year, and indeed really since our last fundraise. But now that it's a reality, we have Hayley joined the company just a few months ago, and she's enormously experienced in helping businesses of our side to grow. And then we're looking forward to leveraging that capability to grow our pipeline. We're going to push forward with our alliance in the personalized medicine, personalized dosing space. And I won't say more about that because I think that's been well covered already. And then also seek opportunities in other areas where our skills and capabilities could be brought to bear in an effective manner.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But Jim takes a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already. I'd like to remind you that recording the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Jim, we received a number of questions, both pre-submitted and obviously you can see during the meeting itself. So if I may just hand back to you to address those, and where appropriate to do so, if you could just read out the question and give your response, please.
Yeah, by all means. So apologies if we don't get to your question. I've tried to take a representative cross section that focuses on the issues and the questions which seem to be of greatest interest. So in terms of developments at Tabula Rasa and how we expect this relationship to unfold, I think I covered that in my main presentation. It is, really great news that initial integration has been completed. Yes, it did take a little bit longer than anticipated. I think we were originally hoping to finish, around about June, July time, and here we are a couple of months after that. But I've seen the result, and it looks fantastic. That's just my personal view. But obviously what's important is the view of the clinicians who are going to be, and the pharmacists in the US who are going to be testing it. So our partner, DoseMeRx, is going to be running that testing process, and we hope to get some feedback from that before the end of the year, and we'll update people, as and when we can on that. The next steps will obviously depend on that feedback, so can't really say more about that right now. Another question was around the relationship, if any, between the collaboration with Tabula Rasa and the partner trial that's going on at PTTU, at the Portsmouth Technology Trials Unit. I think I'd made a comment that these things were going on in parallel, and someone wanted to know really what did that mean, and are these two things connected? And I guess what I would say is that I think that the two activities are going on in parallel, but they may end up being connected. But obviously, because Europe and the US have slightly different regulatory environments, in our partnership with DoseMeRx in the US, that's subject to US regulations around the sorts of software that we're developing, whereas our efforts in the UK are all, obviously subject to European regulations around this software. However, any insights that we gain from the partner study will obviously be available to the collaboration with DoseMeRx also. There's a question around Valorex. We issued the RNS about the updated collaboration agreement in February, saying that we could receive up to £6 million if all goes according to plan. And there's a question around, when would the money be paid? I guess I just have to reiterate that obviously it depends on Valorex doing a deal. We get a percentage of deals that Valorex do in relation to one of their products, Val 201, and obviously any money we get paid the timing of that will obviously mirror the timing of any money that Valorex receives. And there are no guarantees, but I can say that our contribution to that collaboration seems to be going well, and we follow the Valorex story with interest. I think the point about our involvement with Valorex and a seat on their scientific advisory board, I answered earlier, and the answer was yes. My colleague Christophe Chassagnol has joined the Valorex scientific advisory board, so that addresses that. There was a comment, a question rather, around NewMap. How was the work received? Could more work come from NewMap to PHYSIOMICS? Again, we don't comment on specific client engagements typically, but I can say that in general terms, it's been a really excellent collaboration. We're very happy with it. We think the client has been happy with it as well. I can't comment on the likelihood of repeat business, but obviously it's always our aspiration to convert good engagements into repeat business. So as and when we can announce something further on that front, we will. There was a question around the partner study. It was intended to run over 12 months. In September, we announced that the project would be formally extended to April 2022 through an agreement with NIHR. However, we only recruited our first patient in mid-September. And so there's a question around the timelines. I guess all I can say is that the NIHR grant is formally now due to run through till April 2022. There may be a little bit of flexibility in that, but we will obviously have to create a report and provide some formal feedback to NIHR at that point. However, that doesn't mean that we can't continue the study under our own steam. And if we feel like we need to continue on for a few more months in order to get the patient numbers that we need in order to get the data that we need, then we have the resources and the willingness and the interest to do so. So people don't need to be concerned on that front. There's a question: as the pandemic abates, will the board start making personal appearances at the various conferences like AACR? Obviously, this rather depends on the COVID situation. We would certainly like to start to make in-person appearances at conferences again. It rather depends on both the travel situation, both from a UK perspective and from the perspective of the country where the conference is happening, as well as how the conference organisers themselves have set the conference up. So I think we just have to watch that space. But certainly, it's our desire and intention to return to one face-to-face engagement at these sorts of conferences where it's possible and safe to do so. There was a question in relation to one of our AACR posters, which was partially written, had an author, Mr. Christian Hurry of King's College London. There was a question asking, is he on the payroll? Was King's College involved? So Christian Hurry was an intern at PHYSIOMICS, did an excellent job, Christian, if you're listening, from around September through to December 2020. He made a material contribution to that paper, and hence he is an author on the paper. He was not working for PHYSIOMICS in the capacity of a representative of King's College. He happens to be doing some research there. I think that's what the questioner here picked up on. So I believe that addresses that question. There was a question about the partner study start date. So what was the question? The partner study's first recruit was recruited in September, but on the clinicaltrials.gov site, the study start date was noted as 6th of July 2021. So I think this is just a technicality. There was a formal document that was signed in July, which meant that formally the study had started. And so that is the date, I believe, which is noted on clinicaltrials.gov. However, I think that the activity, which is of more material interest to both ourselves and probably yourselves, is the actual progress in recruitment. And so yes, the study started formally in July, but yes, the first recruit happened in September. So I don't think there's any inconsistency between those two things. So let me now just turn to some of the questions that have come in while I've been speaking. So a question here: can you elaborate on where your clients focused their R&D efforts last year? Was oncology drug development put on the back burner as pharma giants turn their attention to COVID vaccine response areas? So I think I did cover this to some extent during my presentation, and I think the answer is probably yes. A lot of pharma companies were both stymied to some extent in being able to progress their cancer trials because of COVID. And at the same time, some of those same companies found COVID-related applications for the same drugs. So I guess some pharma companies were both winners and losers through that process. Some have only won and some have only lost. So, it's a bit of a mixed bag there, but certainly COVID has had a significant impact in slowing down oncology research and, unfortunately, to some extent, treatment over the last year and a half. But it has given opportunities to some companies who have found applications for in COVID for some of their drugs. And indeed, as you guys know, one of the things that our partner collaborator Valorex is exploring is a possible COVID-related use for one of its assets. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Another question, or a couple of questions here in terms of scaling the business. So there's a question here which goes something like, how is the business going to scale? Is it purely a function of additional staff? Are there other things that we can exploit to generate meaningful operating leverage? So I think the answer is both of those things. So certainly the consulting part of the business, will need to take on more staff, and as you've seen, we took on an additional technical team member earlier in the summer, as well as a new business development executive more recently, and that does give us additional capacity and enables us to scale more quickly. However, at the same time, we are always actively exploring ways in which we can leverage what we do, our capabilities and our agreements, in order to grow in ways that are not necessarily related directly to our headcount. I guess that the Valorex agreement is one example of that. The Tabula Rasa RX agreement is another example of that. And through the efforts of our scientific advisory board, we hope to come up with more such ideas that will enable us to develop things which perhaps look a little bit more like assets, and where once they're developed, we can actually derive a revenue stream from them, rather than relying only on the chargeable hours that our staff can do. So I think as you've seen from my presentation, the strategy is kind of threefold at the moment, and involves both an element of traditional consulting, which yes is generally constrained by the number of staff, but also at the same time looking at an asset-based business. The only thing I would say about staff is that whenever we go out to recruit, we always are overwhelmed by the response. So I get a lot of unsolicited emails from both graduates and people who are already employed at other companies saying, we love what you're doing, we'd love to come and work with you guys. And obviously, as and when we think it's sensible and appropriate to expand the team, then we will hopefully be able to reach into a pool of talented individuals who can really help us grow the business. So a question here saying, how has the company's approach to new business development changed with the recent hire in that area? That's a great question. So I think it will change in both quality and quantity. So I think since our last fundraise, we've already been investing in the right sorts of things. So improving our social media presence, excuse me, improving our online presence, investing in databases that enable us to identify new clients, investing in a partner marketing company that can make calls to those new clients, the rigorous use of client relationship management software like Salesforce in order to track our activities in relation to potential new clients. So all of that we'll be able to do, but more, with the help of our new head of business development. But obviously we hope and expect that that individual will also generate new ideas for how we can expand the business. So I think in both of those ways, things will change in a positive manner going forwards. There's a question about our scientific advisory board. What have they identified as being areas of interest and who is on it? So I'm going to have to deliberately pass on that right now, but I do undertake to come back as soon as I can and answer that question once I feel that we have we've done enough to be able to answer that question in a meaningful way. But I would just like to acknowledge it. I understand that it's of material interest to investors. It's really a focus for us as well at the moment. So please watch this space. So just one or two more then, I think, before we close. So there's a question around KPIs. So, I mean, we do have broker forecasts. So it said, in the absence of broker forecasts, what forward-looking KPIs can you give us to understand how the business is likely to perform in the future? So obviously Hybridan do put out numbers for us. I don't think we're covered elsewhere widely. So we're a small company, and I guess that's understandable. And we will continue to try and increase the amount of information that we provide to shareholders. If I just compare and contrast what I was able to say 4 or 5 years ago when I joined the company with what I'm able to say now, there's really no comparison. I think we're being a lot more granular about telling you guys the sorts of things that we're doing in order to try and expand and succeed. I do understand that you would like us to try and quantify that more, and I will again undertake to go away and think about how we might be able to do that. Obviously, as a relatively small company, then one material deal can easily swing things one way or another. So we're still at that stage of our growth where that is a fact. So I need to be a little bit careful in what sort of KPIs we come up with. But let me take that one away and see if we can come back to you on that, if that's okay. And in terms of the shape of the pipeline, again, I'm reluctant to give specific numbers, but I can say that, and I may have said this before, but only because it's true, that I believe our pipeline is the strongest that it's been. Both in terms of identified companies that have oncology assets where we know we can help them, companies that we've actually established contact with, that we've had an initial conversation with, perhaps that we've had a business development call with, through to companies where we're actively talking about projects and proposals, through to existing clients where we can do repeat business, through to champions. I'll call them champions, such as Merck KGaA, who have given us a significant amount of business over an extended period of time, and really acted as a material validation of what we can do in this market. So I think, because I'm running out of voice, I shall probably leave it there. I think I've addressed most of the questions, and I'll hand it back.
You have indeed. So thank you very much. As usual, you've been very kind and generous, and pretty much covered every single question that we've had through. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, the company will have the ability to review those questions. Perhaps before your voice does just go totally, if I could just ask you just for a quick snapshot before we redirect investors to give you some feedback, please.
Sure. Well, I'd just say that PHYSIOMICS is a consultancy. We use mathematical models to support the development of cancer drugs and personalized medicine solutions. We're helping companies develop better cancer drugs more cost effectively, and we're helping health systems and providers get the most out of drugs that they already have, and new drugs which are coming down the pipeline to them.
It's absolutely fantastic, Jim. Thank you again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and is greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of PHYSIOMICS PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session. Thank you and good afternoon.